They say curiosity killed the cat, but on the galactic stage, curiosity is the only reason humanity survived the evolutionary meat grinder of Earth. When a desperate, dehydrated archaeologist stumbles upon a sealed vault of a vanished, godlike civilization, he doesn't just study the ancient technology, he drinks it. But here's the thing about humans, our minds were forged in chaos. So, what happens when a nervous system evolved to survive a death world connects with a weaponized library that drove an advanced species to extinction? The galaxy is about to find out that for humanity, forbidden knowledge is just a challenge waiting to be accepted. Transmission incoming. Before we dive into this chronicle of ancient secrets and human audacity, make sure your comms are open. Smash that like button to support the channel, hit subscribe to join the fleet, and drop a quick comment below telling me which sector of Earth, or the galaxy you're tuning in from today. It really helps the algorithm broadcast our signal further. Now let's descend to the surface. The twin sons of Calithra beat down on Dr. Cassian Rook's back like a physical weight, a relentless, dual-pronged hammer trying to forge him into dust. If there is one thing the universe teaches you, it's that paradise is usually a lie sold by recruitment brochures. Calithra was supposed to be the jewel of the Outer Rim, a planet holding the secrets of the ancient Luminari civilization. Instead, it was a convection oven made of razor-sharp grit and broken dreams. Cassian trudged across the excavation zone, his boots crunching against the sterile, baked soil. He was the newest, and let's be honest, the least respected, member of the Xenoarchaeology Initiative. While his esteemed colleagues were up north, sipping filtered water and brushing dust off monumental alien statues, Cassian had been assigned to Sector 0, a polite way of saying the middle of nowhere. A punishment detail. His crime? Being a human who trusted his gut more than his scanner. In a galaxy dominated by rigid logic and algorithmic precision, Cassian's hunches were seen as evolutionary baggage. But Cassian knew something the sterile academics didn't. Machines only see what they are programmed to look for. Humans? We evolved to spot the tiger hiding in the grass before the algorithm even finished processing the color green. Another glorious day in the sandbox, Cassian muttered, adjusting the brim of his solar hat. His omni-scanner let out a pathetic bleep, confirming for the 1000th time that the ground beneath him was composed of ground. Thus, silicates. Disappointment. But as the afternoon heat peaked, distorting the horizon into a shimmering mirage, Cassian found himself wandering far beyond the safety perimeter. The terrain here was different. The rocks were jagged, jutting out of the earth like the broken teeth of some subterranean leviathan. It felt wrong. Or rather, it felt too right. He ran a gloved hand over a slate-gray protrusion. It was smooth. Too smooth. Friction and wind erosion over 1,000 years should have pitted this surface, but it felt like polished glass. He moved to the largest formation, and there it was, a faint hairline fracture running perfectly vertical down the center. Nature doesn't do straight lines. Not like this. Well, hello there, he whispered, feeling that familiar thrum of adrenaline in his chest, the hunter's instinct waking up. He brushed away layers of caked red dust, revealing intricate, geometric carvings. They weren't just decorative, they were a language. Luminari script. But not the standard trade dialect found in the northern ruins. This was something older, denser. He tapped his comms unit. Command, this is Rook. I've got anomalies at grid F12. Looks like structural integrity, possibly an undocumented outpost. The response was immediate and dripping with static-laced condescension. Rook, you are outside the designated zone. Return to base. Satellites show a Class 5 dust storm mobilizing in your sector. 20 minutes. Cassian looked up. The sky was a bruising purple, clear and innocent. Negative command. These markings are significant. Looks like a seal. If I leave now, the storm covers it back up, and we might never find it again. That is a direct order, Dr. Rook. There is nothing in that sector but rocks and ego. RTB immediately. Cassian looked at the horizon, then down at the rock. He reached up and switched off his comms. This was the human factor that alien species found so terrifying. Logic dictated retreat. Self-preservation dictated retreat. But curiosity? Curiosity whispered, poke it with a stick and see what happens. The wind began to pick up, the prelude to the violence of a Calithran storm. The sand started to bite, stinging his exposed neck. Working with the frantic energy of a man on borrowed time, Cassian scanned the symbols. As he circled the monolith, his boot caught on a hidden ridge, sending him sprawling into the dirt. He landed hard, knocking the wind out of himself. Coughing, he rolled over and froze. His fall had cleared a patch of ground, revealing a perfect circle made of a material that shimmered with a faint, impossible blue hue. It wasn't rock. It was a cap. A seal. The storm was roaring now, a wall of darkness swallowing the suns. Visibility dropped to 0. He knew he should run, try to beat the wall of sand back to the rover, but he was a scientist and he was looking at the discovery of the century. He scrambled to his knees, clawing the dirt away from the circle. The symbols here were pulsing, a soft luminescence that seemed to react to his proximity. It looked like a well. A sealed cistern from a civilization that had mastered matter alchemy while humanity was still figuring out how to sharpen sticks. He needed to mark it. He reached for a geostake in his pack, but in the blinding dust, his hand slipped. His bare palms slapped against the central seal of the artifact. Standard protocol for xenoarchaeology is simple. Don't touch the glowing alien stuff. It's the first rule. But Cassian was a human and rules were more like guidelines. Under his hand, the stone shifted. It didn't grind, it hummed. A sound like a wet finger circling the rim of a crystal glass, amplified 1,000 times. The seal rotated counterclockwise, defying centuries of dormancy. Okay, that's new, Cassian shouted over the howling wind, scrambling backward on his heels. The seal slid aside with a hiss of escaping pressure. A beam of soft, azure light shot upward, cutting through the swirling dust storm like a lighthouse beam in a hurricane. Cassian crawled to the edge and looked down. It wasn't water. It wasn't energy. It was something in between. The Mnemosyne vein. A luminous blue fluid that flowed up the sides of the shaft before cascading down the center, trapped in a perpetual, gravity-defying cycle. It looked viscous, heavy, and mesmerizing. Then the storm truly arrived. A gust of wind moving at hurricane speed slammed into him, nearly tossing him into the open well. He rolled, finding shelter in the lee of the massive stone monolith. There was no going back now. The storm was a meat grinder. If he stepped out, the sand would strip the flesh from his bones. He was trapped. Hours passed. The temperature on Calithera plummeted as night fell, the thin atmosphere failing to hold the day's heat. Cassian huddled under his emergency thermal blanket, shivering violently. But the cold wasn't the killer. It was the thirst. The dry air of the storm was sucking the moisture right out of his body. His canteen was empty. His throat felt like he had swallowed a handful of razor blades. And right there 2 meters away was the liquid. It bubbled and churned, making the sound of a pristine mountain stream. In the pitch black of the storm, the blue glow was hypnotic. It beckoned him. Don't do it, his rational brain screamed. That is unknown alien chemical sludge. It's likely coolant or fuel or raw biological waste. Drinking it is suicide. But time is a funny thing. By midnight, logic had lost the war against biology. Cassian was delirious. His body was shutting down. Survival instinct, that lizard brain that lies deep beneath the neocortex, took the wheel. Death by dehydration is 100% certain, he thought, his mind fuzzy. Death by drinking glowing space juice? Maybe only 50%. For science, he croaked, a dry, hysterical laugh escaping his cracked lips. He crawled toward the Mnemosyne vein. The dust clogged his goggles, but he could see the liquid reacting to him. It swirled faster, flashes of silver and violet dancing in the blue depths. It looked like liquid data. He reached into his pack and pulled out a sample vial. Safety first, he thought sarcastically. He dipped the glass vial into the fluid. The moment the liquid touched the glass, the vial disintegrated. It didn't break. It turned to dust, the glass particles simply unraveling at a molecular level. Cassian yanked his hand back, heart hammering. Okay. Solvents. High acidity. But he looked at his fingers. A few droplets had splashed onto his skin. There was no burn. No dissolving flesh. Instead, the spot felt warm. Pleasant. Like dipping your hand into warm water on a freezing day. It dissolved the glass container, but not the organic hand holding it. That was the Deathworlder factor. Humanity evolved in a biosphere that actively tries to kill its inhabitants with bacteria, viruses, solar radiation, and toxic plants. We are biological tanks. Maybe, just maybe, he could take it. He cupped his hands. The liquid felt heavy like mercury but cool. It seemed to caress his skin, moving with a weird, semi-sentient fluidity. Before he could talk himself out of it, Cassian Rook drank. It didn't taste like water. It tasted like static. Like licking a 9-volt battery wrapped in velvet. It wasn't sweet or salty, it was pure, unadulterated potential. It slid down his throat, alternating between freezing cold and burning hot, leaving no aftertaste but a lingering sensation of electricity on his tongue. The effect was instantaneous. A shock wave of energy detonated in his stomach and raced through his veins. The cold vanished. The exhaustion vanished. His mind, usually a cluttered attic of anxieties and half-finished thoughts, suddenly snapped into terrifying clarity. He gasped, his eyes flying wide open. Then the screaming started. It wasn't a sound. It was pressure. Inside his skull. It felt like someone was trying to inflate a balloon inside his brain. Cassian collapsed, clutching his head, writhing in the dust. His vision fractured. The world wasn't made of shapes anymore, it was made of math. Kaleidoscopic fractals spun before his eyes. Equations, diagrams, star charts, biological schematics, flashing by at the speed of light. It was an information overload that should have liquefied his neurons. "What is happening to me?" he groaned, curling into a fetal ball. The pain was absolute. It was the friction of a galaxy's worth of history being forced through the narrow aperture of a primate brain. But human brains are plastic. We adapt. We rewire. Where a rigid Luminari mind might have shattered under the chaos, Cassian's chaotic human mind stretched. And then, just as suddenly, the pain stopped. Cassian lay panting in the dirt. He opened his eyes. The storm was still raging, but he could see through it. The dust particles weren't just blocking his view, they were transparent data points. He looked at the rocks. They were pulsing with veins of energy he hadn't seen before. The Mnemosyne vein wasn't just a well, it was a hub. He saw massive, glowing cables of ethereal energy stretching out from the well, plunging into the earth, connecting to a network that spanned the entire planet. He scrambled to his feet, unsteady. He looked at his hands. Under the skin, his veins glowed with a faint, rhythmic blue light, syncing with the pulse of the well. Remarkable adaptability, a voice resonated. It didn't come from the comms. It came from the air itself. Cassian spun around, adrenaline spiking. Floating above the open well was a figure composed entirely of the same blue luminescence. It was vaguely humanoid but fluid, shifting like smoke in a draft. It had no face, yet Cassian could feel it staring at him with intense curiosity. What are you?" Cassian stammered, backing up until his heels hit the stone rim. The figure tilted its head. "I am designated Aurora 0. Once I was the High Archivist of the Luminari Collective. Now, I suppose your primitive lexicon would classify me as a ghost." "A ghost?" Cassian repeated, his voice flat. "Great. I drank the space juice and now I'm hallucinating." Classic Rook. "Not a hallucination," Aurora corrected gently, gliding closer. "And not a ghost in the spiritual sense. I am an echo. A consciousness imprinted onto the mnemonic fluid you just ingested. I am the software, the well is the hardware. And you are the unexpected user interface." Cassian rubbed his eyes. The blue glow in his veins didn't fade. "You're an AI? A hologram?" "Inadequate terms," Aurora hummed, shimmering with amusement. "I am preservation. My memories, personality, and processing power were encoded into the fluid to survive the great diminishing. I have been dormant for 1,000 years, waiting for a compatible nervous system to activate the handshake protocol." Aurora drifted closer, examining Cassian's face. The Mnemosyne vein was designed to uplift the Luminari mind, to expand our capacity for dimensional understanding. It rewires the neural pathways. Your visual cortex has already been upgraded to perceive the energy lattice of reality. "You rewired my brain?" Cassian's voice rose an octave. "Without asking?" "You drank the fluid," Aurora pointed out logically. "That constitutes a request for access. I must admit, I calculated a 94% probability of neural collapse for a species of your density. Yet, your neuroplasticity is astounding. You didn't break. You stretched. Humans are surprisingly resilient containers." Cassian took a deep breath. The panic was there, but the scientist in him was louder. He was talking to a dead civilization. This was first contact. "Why hide in a well?" Cassian asked, gesturing to the glowing pit. "Why seal it away?" Aurora's form flickered, growing dim for a second. "We hid because we broke the sky." She waved a hand, and the air around them filled with three-dimensional projections. Cassian watched, wide-eyed, as a city of impossible crystal spires appeared. It was beautiful. Perfect. "We were the Luminari," Aurora narrated, her voice layered with sadness. "We sought to transcend the physical universe. We manipulated the barriers between dimensions, seeking infinite energy, infinite life." The projection shifted. The sky in the image tore open. Reality warped. Buildings twisted into impossible shapes. The Luminari people in the vision didn't die. They unraveled, fading into geometry and screams. We reached too high, Aurora whispered. We opened doors that should have remained shut. Entities from the spaces between spaces. They noticed us. The laws of physics broke down. To save what little we could, we liquidated our knowledge and stored our consciousness in these veins, sealing them beneath the crust. We left warnings. We hoped the next civilization would be wiser. She turned her faceless gaze to Cassian. And now you are here. A species that explores without fear. A species that drinks unknown substances because of thirst. Cassian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. Are you saying those things, the things that destroyed you, are still out there? The breaches have healed, Aurora said. But the knowledge that created them is now coursing through your bloodstream. Your species is clever, Cassian Rook. You build tools before you understand the physics. You are reckless. It would be unfortunate if you followed our path. Suddenly the wind died down. The howling sand ceased. Cassian looked east. The violet dawn was breaking, cutting through the settling dust. In the distance, the roar of engines echoed off the canyon walls. My team, Cassian said, realizing the implications. They're coming. He looked at the glowing well, then at his glowing hands and finally at the alien ghost floating in front of him. He had broken every protocol in the book. He had ingested an alien archive. And now, the corporate-sponsored excavation team, led by people who cared more about profit margins than planetary safety, was minutes away. I have to report this, Cassian muttered, mostly to himself. This changes everything. Biology, physics, history. Knowledge is neutral, Aurora warned, her form fading slightly as the sunlight hit her. But the application of it is not. What you share with your people will determine if you ascend to the stars, or if you burn your world to ash. Cassian watched the approaching dust plumes of the recovery rovers. He felt the hum of the planet's energy grid vibrating in his teeth. He wasn't just an archaeologist anymore. He was a biological hard drive for a dead god. And he had a feeling that the hardest part wasn't surviving the storm. It was going to be surviving the people coming to rescue him. The roar of the approaching rover engines wasn't just a sound to Dr. Cassian Rook anymore. It was a visible waveform. As the lead transport crested the ridge, kicking up a rooster tail of red dust, Cassian didn't just see a vehicle. He saw the combustion efficiency of the engine, the stress fractures in the rear axle, and the electromagnetic hum of the communications array. The Mnemosyne vein hadn't just opened his eyes, it had taken the hood off the universe and showed him the engine underneath. He stood calmly by the glowing edge of the well, the blue circuitry beneath his skin pulsing in time with the idling transport. When the door hissed open, Dr. Elara Vance, his closest ally and the only person on the team who didn't treat him like a walking liability, stumbled out. She looked frantic, her face caked in dust mask lines, eyes wide with the expectation of finding a corpse. Cassian, she screamed, sliding down the embankment. We lost your signal hours ago. The storm, we thought you were dead. She stopped dead 3 meters away. The relief on her face curdled into confusion, then pure, scientific bewilderment. She looked at the impossible, glowing monoliths rising from the ground. She looked at the swirling vortex of blue fluid defying gravity in the well. And finally she looked at Cassian's eyes. Human irises are complex, but they don't glow. They certainly don't shift like fractals. You're blue, she whispered, her hand hovering over her stunned baton. Cassian, why are your veins glowing? I drank the water, Elara, Cassian said, his voice carrying a strange, resonant harmonic that seemed to vibrate in her chest. Turns out, the Luminari didn't leave us ruins. They left us a library. And I just checked out the first book. Before Elara could process that, the rest of the convoy arrived. The scene that followed was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Scientists poured out, scanners chirping wildly. They treated Cassian like a radioactive anomaly, circling him with Geiger counters and bioscanners. But Cassian barely registered them. He was listening to Aurora. They are fearful, the AI's voice echoed in his mind, though she remained invisible to the others. Their cortisol levels are spiking. A primitive response to the unknown. Be careful, Cassian. Fear makes your species irrational. And irrational creatures with kinetic weaponry are dangerous. I can handle them, Cassian muttered. Handle who? Elara asked sharply, snapping her fingers in front of his face. Cassian, you're talking to thin air. We need to get you to medbay. That fluid could be mutational. It could be. It's knowledge, Elara, Cassian interrupted, grabbing her shoulders. He needed her to understand. It's not toxic. It's data. Liquid memory. This well? It's connected to everything. I can see the grid, Elara. There are 12 major nodes across Calithra. We've been digging in the dirt for years while the answers were flowing right beneath our feet. He pointed at the well. This is first contact. But not with a species. With their legacy. Over the next few weeks, the excavation site transformed. It went from a punishment detail to the most heavily guarded square kilometer in the sector. The Xenoarchaeology Initiative locked it down. They brought in the big guns, literally and metaphorically. Cassian became less of a researcher and more of a test subject. But as the days passed, the initial fear turned to hunger. The data Cassian was spitting out, equations for zero-point energy, maps of star systems that hadn't been discovered yet, medical formulas that could cure cellular degeneration, was priceless. But with value comes vultures. The mood shifted on the 21st day. Cassian was in the command tent, reviewing spectral analysis of the well, when the perimeter alarms began to wail. It wasn't a storm warning. It was a proximity alert. Unidentified convoy inbound, the security chief barked. Heavy transport. Corporate markings. Cassian felt a cold spike in his gut. His enhanced vision seemed to zoom in, piercing the canvas walls of the tent, looking out toward the horizon. He saw the energy signatures before he saw the vehicles. Massive, inefficient, aggressive power plants. Apex Dynamics, Cassian said, the name tasting like ash. Elara looked up from her console, pale. How do you know? I can taste their greed from here, Cassian replied grimly. And because they're the only ones arrogant enough to drive heavy assault rovers over a heritage site. The convoy rolled in like an invasion force. Black armor, gold trim, and the jagged logo of Apex Dynamics, the megacorp that owned half the mining rights in the Outer Rim. They didn't park, they occupied. The airlock of the lead command crawler hissed open, and out stepped Executive Overseer Neri's Cade. If Cassian was a grimy, chaotic element of human intuition, Neri's Cade was the void where empathy went to die. She was immaculate in a climate-controlled envirosuit that cost more than Cassian's entire education. She didn't walk, she glided, flanked by a security detail carrying military-grade plasma rifles. Cassian stepped out to meet her, flanked by Elara and a handful of nervous university security guards. The contrast was laughable. Academics with flashlights versus a corporate private army. Dr. Rook, Cade said, her voice smooth, polished, and utterly devoid of warmth. She didn't offer a hand. She just looked him up and down, her eyes lingering on the blue glow beneath his skin. Corporate intelligence suggested you'd found something interesting. I see the reports were an understatement. You've successfully weaponized yourself. I'm an archaeologist, Cade, not a weapon, Cassian said, crossing his arms. And this is a protected scientific site under the Jupiter Accords. You have no jurisdiction here. Cade smiled. It was the kind of smile a shark gives before it rolls its eyes back. Jurisdiction is a function of leverage, Doctor. And Apex Dynamics holds the lease on this entire sector. We allowed the university to dig here as a tax write-off. But now that you've found something with proprietary value, the lease terms have been reassessed. She gestured to the glowing well behind him. That asset is now Apex property. And so are you, technically, since you contain a significant amount of the asset in your bloodstream. It's not an asset, Cassian snapped, his patience fraying. It's a warning. This technology destroyed the people who built it. You can't just slap a patent on it and sell it. Cade laughed softly. Oh, Dr. Rook, you're so quaintly academic. Anything can be sold. Energy, health, immortality. We're taking over the site. My team will begin extraction of the fluid immediately. We'll drain the well and ship it to the orbital refineries for analysis. Cassian felt a surge of panic. Drain it? They cannot. Aurora's voice sliced through his mind, sharp and urgent. The Mnemosyne vein is not a tank. It is a circuit. If they attempt to drain it without the proper neural handshake, the energy discharge will be catastrophic. It will not just kill them. It will destabilize the planetary crust. Cassian took a step forward, his eyes flaring with blue light. If you touch that well, you'll kill everyone on this continent. Cade's security detail raised their rifles. The polite mode switch in Cassian's brain flickered. Stand down, Cade ordered her men, though she didn't look away from Cassian. Dr. Rook, I'm going to give you 1 hour to clear your personal effects and hand over your data. After that, any personnel remaining in the zone will be treated as corporate saboteurs. And we have very strict protocols for saboteurs. She turned on her heel and walked back to her crawler. The message was clear. The takeover was happening and they didn't care about the consequences. Cassian stood trembling in the dust. Not from fear, humans from Earth don't get scared, they get angry, but from the sheer, overwhelming stupidity of it all. They're going to crack the planet open to boost their stock price, Ilara said, her voice shaking. Cassian, what do? We can't fight them. They have a platoon of shock troops. Cassian looked at the well. The blue fluid was churning violently, reacting to the hostile intent of the newcomers. I need to talk to Aurora, Cassian said. Alone. He returned to the edge of the well. The suns were setting, casting long, blood-red shadows across the site. The Apex camp was setting up floodlights, drilling rigs, and containment units. They were preparing to rape the history of a dead world. Aurora. Cassian hissed at the empty air. You saw them. You analyzed them. Tell me you have a defense protocol. The air shimmered, and the ghostly blue form of the High Archivist materialized. She looked more defined now, her features sharper. She looked worried. I have calculated the trajectory of this interaction, Aurora said. The entity known as Neres Cade possesses a psych profile consistent with the leaders of the Luminari during the late era. Ambition without comprehension. If they breach the containment seal with their extraction pumps, the feedback loop will shatter the local reality manifold. She waved her hand, and the air filled with a new projection. It wasn't the past this time. It was the future. Cassian watched in horror. He saw the Apex rigs activate. He saw the blue fluid turn a violent, sickly violet. He saw the well explode, not with fire but with silence. A sphere of negation expanded outward. Where it touched the Apex soldiers, they didn't die, they were rewritten. Their flesh turned to glass, their screams turned to static. The sphere expanded, swallowing the camp, then the region, then the planet. And then the image shifted to Earth. He saw a research lab in New York. A vial of the fluid being opened. And the same violet negation spreading across Manhattan. This is the probability, Aurora stated calmly. Humanity is not ready for the raw Mnemosyne fluid. You survived because you were desperate, and because your specific genetic anomaly allowed for integration. But if they mass-produce this? If they try to monetize godhood? Your species joins us in the dark. Cassian felt sick. So we stop them. We fight. You have rocks, Aurora noted dryly. They have plasma rifles. The probability of martial success is 0.04%. Then what? Cassian demanded. We just let them end the world? No, Aurora said. She drifted closer, hovering over the center of the well. There is a secondary protocol. The Guardian Protocol. The wells were designed to be sealed against unauthorized use. But to activate the lockout, the network requires a prime administrator. You? Cassian asked. I am Code, Aurora said. I am the librarian, not the owner. I cannot lock the doors. Only a living consciousness, fully integrated with the network, can override the physical controls. You must become the key, Cassian. Cassian stared at the swirling depths of the well. You mean, drink more of it? No, Aurora said softly. Drinking was the handshake. Now you must shake the hand properly. You must immerse yourself, body and mind. You must enter the vein. If I jump in there, will I come back? Aurora hesitated. It was the hesitation of a machine trying to calculate the value of a soul. You will return. But you will not be the same. The integration will be permanent. You will cease to be merely human. You will be a hybrid of biology and archive. You will see everything. You will feel the pulse of this planet as your own heartbeat. You will be the wall between your species and their own destruction. Cassian looked back at the Apex camp. He saw Neres Cade laughing with her security chief, pointing at the well like it was a gold mine. He thought of Ilara, terrified in the command tent. He thought of Earth, a chaotic, messy, beautiful blue marble that didn't deserve to be erased by a quarterly earnings report. This was the HFY truth. Aliens seek perfection. They seek safety. Humans? We seek the line in the sand and we cross it because we have to. We are Deathworlders. We endure the unendurable. Permanent, Cassian muttered. Goodbye, retirement. He tapped his comms. Ilara? Cassian? Where are you? The hour is almost up. Cade is mobilizing her drill team. Listen to me closely, Cassian said, his voice eerily calm. Get our team to the transport. Get as far back as you can. At least 5 clicks. What? What are you going to do? I'm going to take the job offer, Cassian said. I'm going to lock the door. Cassian, wait. He cut the connection. He stood on the precipice of the well. The fluid churned below, sensing his intent. It looked less like water now and more like a living mind, swirling with galaxies of data. Aurora watched him. Are you prepared to carry the weight of 1,000 years, Cassian Rook? Cassian cracked his knuckles. A grin, sharp, dangerous and undeniably human, cut across his face. "I survived a PhD defense and 3 years on a diet of ration bars and spite," he said. "I think I can handle a little heavy lifting." He didn't wait for Cade's deadline. He didn't wait for permission. Cassian Rook stepped off the ledge. He didn't fall, the liquid rose to meet him. It wrapped around his ankles, then his waist, then his chest, pulling him down with a gentle, terrifying strength. The cold was absolute. The silence was absolute. As the blue surface closed over his head, Cassian Rook didn't hold his breath. He inhaled. And the universe exploded into light. The sensation wasn't drowning. Drowning is panic. It is the violent rejection of fluid by lungs designed for air. This was translation. As the Mnemosyne fluid filled Cassian Rook's lungs, the panic center of his brain, the amygdala, fired once and then went silent. The cold that had wrapped around his ankles moments ago vanished, replaced by a hum that wasn't heard but felt. It vibrated in the marrow of his bones, a frequency that matched the rotation of the planet itself. He opened his eyes. He wasn't floating in a dark well anymore. He was suspended in a cathedral of light. The physical walls of the shaft were gone, replaced by cascading streams of data, glyphs, equations, star charts and memories, flowing in rivers of neon blue. He looked down at his body. It was translucent. He could see his own nervous system, but it wasn't just nerves anymore. It was fiber optic cabling, glowing with the same pulse as the archive. Integration at 40%, Aurora's voice echoed, not from outside but from within his own thoughts. The human mind is messy, Cassian. You compartmentalize. You repress. You dream. It is chaotic. The Luminari mind was a filing cabinet. Yours is a hurricane. Is that a bug or a feature? Cassian thought, his internal voice sounding like thunder rolling across a valley. A feature, Aurora admitted. The archive was stagnant. It needed chaos to wake up. It needed a Deathworlder's resilience to process the trauma of our history. Do not fight the current. Let it rewrite you. Cassian relaxed. He let go of the concept of Cassian Rook, human male, 35 years old. He expanded. Suddenly his perception shot outward. He wasn't just in the well, he was the well. And not just this one. He felt a sudden violent yank, and his consciousness was flung across the curvature of Calithera. He saw them, 11 other major nodes buried deep beneath mountains, oceans and deserts. He saw the ley lines connecting them, a web of dormant energy that wrapped the planet in a protective embrace. He felt the tectonic plates grinding. He felt the solar radiation hitting the upper atmosphere. He felt the heartbeat of a world that had been sleeping for a millennium. And he felt the itch. A localized irritation on the skin of the planet, right above his physical location. Apex dynamics. He could feel their intentions. It wasn't telepathy, it was energy analysis. He felt the jagged, greedy spikes of their drilling equipment. He felt the cold, metallic order of their weapons charging. He felt the void of empathy that was Neri's Cade. They are deploying the extraction bore, Aurora warned, her presence merging with his. They are attempting to force the lock. If they breach the seal while the network is waking up, the feedback will vaporize the continent. Not on my watch, Cassian projected. Then return, Aurora whispered. The protocol is active. You are no longer a guest, Cassian. You are the admin. Above ground, the situation had deteriorated into a standoff at the edge of oblivion. Ilara Vance and her small team of researchers were huddled near the transport rovers, 5 kilometers out, watching the feed from the site's perimeter cameras. The image was grainy, distorted by the immense electromagnetic interference emanating from the well. They're actually doing it, Ilara whispered, horror gripping her throat. They're drilling into a loaded gun. At the excavation site, the Apex Dynamics team was moving with military precision. A massive, treaded drilling rig had been positioned over the mouth of the well. Hydraulic stabilizers hissed as they dug into the rocky soil. Overseer Neri's Cade stood on the command deck of her crawler, sipping a pouch of filtered water, watching the telemetry screens. Structural integrity of the cap is compromised, her chief engineer reported. We're reading massive energy spikes, ma'am. The liquid it's rising. Let it rise, Cade said coolly. We'll pump it straight into the containment tankers. I want 5,000 liters secured before the suns come up. Ma'am, the security chief interrupted, his voice tight. The ground. Look at the seismic readings. Cade glanced at the screen. The graph wasn't shaking, it was flatlining. Equipment malfunction? No, the chief said, pointing out the viewport. Look. The dust around the drilling rig had stopped swirling. It was suspended in midair. The pebbles on the ground began to vibrate, then floated inches off the deck. The massive, multi-ton drilling rig groaned as metal twisted against metal. A sound began to build. It wasn't the mechanical roar of engines. It was a choir. A deep, resonant hum that sounded like a cello bowed by a giant. No. The Mnemosyne vein erupted. But it didn't splash. The blue liquid shot upward in a solid pillar, smashing into the drilling rig. The massive machine was tossed aside like a child's toy, crashing into the rocks with a screech of tearing metal. The apex soldiers scattered, shouting orders, raising their rifles. The pillar of liquid hung in the air, defying gravity. Then it slowly coalesced. The fluid receded, shaping itself, condensing, until a figure stood hovering 2 meters above the open mouth of the well. It was Cassian Rook. But it wasn't the man who had jumped in. His environment suit was gone, replaced by a skin-tight layer of the mnemonic fluid that shifted and hardened into a sort of organic armor. His skin was pale, almost marble-like, glowing with an internal bioluminescence. And his eyes. There were no whites, no pupils. Just twin pools of swirling galaxies, rotating with the slow, terrifying certainty of a singularity. He lowered himself slowly to the ground. His boots, if they were boots, touched the dust and a ripple of blue energy shot outward, knocking the apex soldiers off their feet. Neri's Cade gripped the railing of her command deck, her knuckles white. "Open fire," she screamed, her composure cracking. "Neutralize the target." "Belay that order," the security chief yelled, but 2 of the younger, more trigger-happy guards didn't listen. They squeezed the triggers of their plasma rifles. Bolts of superheated ionized gas screamed across the excavation zone, aiming straight for Cassian's chest. Cassian didn't dodge. He didn't raise a shield. He simply raised a hand. The plasma bolts stopped. They froze in midair, inches from his palm, vibrating violently against an invisible barrier. Cassian tilted his head, looking at the lethal energy with the curiosity of a man inspecting a moth. "Rude," Cassian said. His voice was no longer just his own. It was layered, a chorus of thousands of Luminari voices speaking in unison with his human baritone. It didn't require a comms unit, it vibrated the air itself. He flicked his wrist. The plasma bolts dissolved, their energy sucked into the atmosphere and harmlessly dispersed as a flash of static electricity. "This site is under new management," Cassian announced, his gaze locking onto Cade. "The lease has been terminated." Cade stumbled down from the crawler, flanked by her remaining guards. She was shaking, but her corporate programming was strong. She tried to rally. You are in violation of Corporate Statute 9, she shouted, her voice shrill. "You are utilizing stolen proprietary biotechnology. Surrender immediately, or we will orbital strike this position." Cassian laughed. It was a terrifying sound, the sound of a mountain cracking. "You think you have the high ground, Neres?" Cassian asked, taking a step forward. The ground trembled with his footfall. "You are standing on the skin of a sleeping giant. And I just woke it up." He gestured to the monolithic stones surrounding the site. They erupted with light. Beams of blue energy shot into the sky, piercing the atmosphere. "Orbital strike?" Cassian mused. "Go ahead. Call it in. My perception extends to orbit. I can see your satellites. I can see the guidance chips in their thrusters. I can rewrite their targeting subroutines to aim at your headquarters instead of me. Do you want to play that game?" Cade went pale. She tapped her earpiece, checking with her fleet. The look of horror on her face confirmed it. Her systems were locked out. "What are you?" she whispered. "I'm the librarian," Cassian said. "And you're making too much noise." As he spoke, the air behind him shimmered. The massive, ghostly form of Aurora manifested, towering over the scene. She was 50 feet tall now, a goddess of pure light. "The entity designated Cassian Rook speaks for the archive," Aurora intoned, her voice booming like thunder. "The Guardian Protocol is in effect. All hostile biologicals must depart the exclusion zone." Cade stared up at the giant alien ghost. Her world, a world of contracts, hostile takeovers, and leverage, shattered against the reality of ancient, god-tier power. We can negotiate," Cade stammered, switching tactics. "Think of the potential, Dr. Rook. We can work together. We have resources. Funding. We can distribute this technology. Think of the good we could do. The profit." Cassian walked up to her. He towered over her now, radiating a heat that wasn't hot, but intense. "I have seen the timeline where we work with you, Neres," Cassian said softly. He reached out and touched her forehead. He didn't ask permission. Flash. Neri's Cade gasped as a vision was forced into her mind. She saw Earth. She saw the apex lapse. She saw the dimensional tear. She saw her own body unraveling into geometric shapes as the laws of physics collapsed. She felt the pain of a billion souls screaming as reality dissolved. She saw the end of the human race, brought about by a 2% increase in quarterly revenue. The vision lasted a second, but for Cade it felt like a lifetime. Cassian pulled his hand back. Cade collapsed to her knees, retching in the dust. Tears streamed down her face, not of sadness but of pure, primal terror. "That is what happens when you skip the prerequisites," Cassian said coldly. "The Luminari died because they rushed. Humanity will not make the same mistake." He looked around at the terrified soldiers. "Pack your gear. Take your drills. If you are not off the surface of Calithra by sunset, I will have the planet digest your vehicles." It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of geological fact. The Apex team didn't wait for Cade to give the order. They scrambled. It was a rout. The most powerful corporate military in the sector fled from one man and a ghost. 6 months later, the excavation site on Calithra had changed. The military fortifications were gone, replaced by a sprawling, open-air university campus. The United Earth Science Directorate had taken over jurisdiction, but everyone knew who was really in charge. Dr. Ilara Vance sat on a bench near the Mnemosyne vein, watching a team of xenobiologists carefully taking readings from a secondary node. "They're finding a cure for the Rylos plague in the subdirectories," a voice said behind her. Ilara smiled and turned. Cassian stood there. He looked more human today, though the blue circuitry under his skin was still visible, and his eyes still held that distant, galaxy-spanning depth. He wore a simple lab coat, but he moved with the stillness of a statue. "We're already synthesizing the protein," Ilara said. "It's going to save millions, Cassian. And the clean energy reactor designs? We're looking at the end of fossil fuels on Earth within a decade." "Good," Cassian said, sitting beside her. He looked up at the twin suns. "Humanity is adapting. Faster than Aurora predicted." "How is she?" Ilara asked. "Busy," Cassian replied. "She's cataloging the history files. We're preparing the second lesson plan. Terraforming for beginners. She thinks we're ready." Ilara looked at him, sadness touching her eyes. "And you? Have you tried disconnecting?" Cassian looked at his hands. "I can't, Ilara. Not fully. If I leave the network, the safeguards drop. Someone has to hold the door." "You gave up everything," she whispered. "You can never go back to Earth, can you? The sensory overload would be too much." "I gave up a quiet life," Cassian corrected gently. "But look at what we gained." He gestured to the bustling camp, to the researchers working together, to the sky where a transport ship was taking off, carrying knowledge that would heal a wounded Earth. "The Luminari fell because they were perfect," Cassian said, a hint of his old roguish smile returning. "They were rigid, logical. When the chaos came, they broke." He tapped his temple. "But us? We're Deathworlders. We're born in the mud. We thrive in the chaos. We're the only ones crazy enough to drink the poison and call it medicine." He stood up, the blue light in his veins pulsing in harmony with the hum of the well. "I'm not just a guardian, Ilara," he said, looking toward the horizon where the next adventure waited. "I'm the bridge. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the traffic is moving in the right direction." Cassian Rook turned back to the archive. The work wasn't done. In fact, for a species as stubborn, reckless, and brilliant as humanity, the lesson had just begun. And that is the chronicle of Dr. Cassian Rook, the man who drank the library and lived to teach the class. If you enjoyed this journey into the archives of human resilience, destroy that like button like it's a plasma bolt hitting a force field. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on so you don't miss the next transmission from the deep dark. Check out the playlist on your screen right now for more stories of humanity proving the galaxy wrong. Until next time, keep your eyes on the stars and remember, never drink the glowing blue liquid, unless you're ready to become a god. Echoes of Sci-Fi signing off.